My name is Camille J. Arroyo. I'm 30 years old. If you'd paused the night right before my sister walked in, you'd have thought you were looking at one of those montage moments from a movie, the part where everything finally works out for the main character. The ceremony had gone flawlessly. The lights were warm and soft, spilling across the tables like candlelight. People weren't just politely smiling. They were glowing with that kind of happiness you can feel in your chest. My husband, Daniel, looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Our first dance had gone perfectly. Even my usually anxious brain had calmed down long enough to let me feel it. For the first time in a very long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then Alyssa arrived. She was late enough for everyone to notice. The music didn't literally stop, but I swear it stumbled for a second. She stepped into the venue like it was a runway. Head high, hair perfect, a small smirk at the corner of her mouth. Her entrance would have been dramatic enough on its own, but it was what she was wearing that punched the air out of the room. White, not off-white, not cream, not champagne or pearl, or, oh no, this is actually blush if you look close. White, a floor-length, fitted, full-on wedding white gown that caught the light like it was doing it on purpose. I watched the realization pass across people's faces like a wave. One of Daniel's uncles actually leaned over and whispered to me, "Is this some kind of bit?" It wasn't a bit. Alyssa just didn't care. She never has. She walked in like the whole day was about her, and somehow, without saying a single word at first, she sucked half the oxygen out of the room. Guests shifted in their chairs, eyes flicking between me and her, waiting to see what I'd do. What I did was nothing. I felt Daniel's hand tighten lightly around mine. I caught his eye and saw the question there, but also the decision. He glanced at Alyssa once, then turned back to me and smiled like she wasn't even there. It shouldn't have made me want to cry, but it did. Because if anyone had earned a peaceful wedding day, it was Daniel. He's the one who has held me together quietly for years while I tried to hold everyone else together loudly. So I made a choice right then. I was not going to let her ruin this for him. I swallowed everything. Embarrassment, anger, the urge to walk across the room and demand to know what the hell she was thinking, and shoved it down somewhere behind my ribs. I smiled. I laughed when I was supposed to. I danced when the DJ called us onto the floor. I thanked guests, posed for photos, cut the cake, made speeches, hugged people I barely knew. I matched Daniel's grace because he deserved that version of me on our wedding night. But underneath it, everything felt like walking on glass. I saw the way people's eyes flickered toward Alyssa's dress and then back to my face. I heard the whispers in the corners of the room. Some of them pretended not to notice. Others lingered a beat too long on, "You look beautiful," like they were privately apologizing for whatever my sister was trying to do. Alyssa, for her part, played it casual. Sat at her table, drank, laughed, chatted, basked, like she hadn't just shown up in a white dress to her sister's wedding. We got through dinner. We got through the toasts. We made it through the parent dances and the part of the night where everyone starts taking off their shoes. Guests checked on me quietly, the ones who knew the history. "Are you okay? Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head each time. I was not going to give her the satisfaction of a scene. For a while, it almost felt like we'd made it. The tension in my shoulders started to loosen. The music got louder, people got drunker, the lights seemed warmer. I watched Daniel laugh with his friends and thought maybe we'd outrun it. Then Alyssa stood up. She was at a table near the dance floor, glass in hand, a large, bulbous wine glass glinting with dark red liquid under the fairy lights. The DJ had just lowered the music, that in-between space where people sometimes do last-minute toasts. For half a second, I wondered if this was it, if she'd decided to smooth it over. Maybe she'd clink her glass, make some half-hearted speech about being proud of me, and we'd call it even. Alyssa turned, not to me, but to Daniel. "Here's to the family fraud in white," she said. Her voice cut through the room like a knife. There was a half-beat where no one reacted, because no one quite believed she'd said it. Then she threw the wine. Not at Daniel. At me. I didn't have time to move. The wine hit full on, cold and sticky, exploding into my bodice and cascading down the front of my dress like a slow-motion bloodstain. Dark red streaks soaked the lace, dripping onto the floor, blooming across the fabric in ugly, jagged shapes. Someone near us actually laughed, a brittle, confused little sound, then choked it back when they realized it wasn't a joke. The room went silent. One of Daniel's cousins dropped her glass. It shattered against the floor with a sharp crack. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of the stain, the chill of the wine, the eyes of 100 people on me. My mother reacted next. Not to me, to her. She rushed straight to Alyssa, grabbed her by the arm, pulled her half behind her like a child caught misbehaving. She didn't mean it, Mom hissed, loud enough that at least 3 tables heard. Of course she meant it. Alyssa never does anything halfway. When she's hurt, everyone burns until she feels warm again. If she's miserable, she will drag the whole room into misery with her rather than sit in it alone. Daniel stepped toward me, his face a storm of fury and concern. Cam, I held up a hand, tiny, absurd gesture, and heard my own voice come out strangely calm. I'm fine, I said. I'll go change. I didn't look at Alyssa. I didn't look at my mother. I walked out of the reception hall and into the quiet of the bridal suite, the door closing behind me like a muffled sigh. For a few seconds, I just stared at myself in the mirror, white ruined by red, a night meant for joy stained by a pattern so familiar it almost made me laugh. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything back. I took a breath, stripped off the dress, and slipped into the backup outfit I'd packed, just in case, though I'd imagined spilled champagne, not weaponized wine. When I stepped back into the reception, people looked away, then back. I could see the questions hanging in the air. I chose to act like nothing had happened. I smiled. I danced. I wrapped my arms around Daniel and whispered, "We're okay." He kissed my forehead. "We're more than okay," he said. "We're married." I held on to that. But somewhere beneath the layers of performance and habit, a different part of me was wide awake. This, I decided, was the last time Alyssa would humiliate me. After the last guest left, after the DJ packed up, after my parents disappeared with Alyssa in tow and the venue went quiet, Daniel and I finally went home. He fell asleep fast, exhaustion and whiskey pulling him under. He still looked peaceful. I lay awake next to him, watching his chest rise and fall. I didn't feel peaceful. So I slipped out of bed, padded downstairs, and opened my laptop at the kitchen counter. The house was silent, the glow from the screen the only light. I logged into the shared bank account, the emergency account I had set up and funded, where my paycheck went to rescue Alyssa from her disasters. Tuition, rent, car repairs, fees, random charges that somehow always ended up my responsibility. My name on the account, my money in it, her life built on it. I stared at the balance. The number looked obscene suddenly, like a monument to my own inability to say no. Then I went into the settings and froze the account. No warning, no explanation, just one decisive click. Done! I closed the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the sink until my breathing slowed. Upstairs, Daniel shifted in his sleep, then settled again. For the first time in years, I made a financial decision that didn't factor in how it would save Alyssa. The next morning, at 8:40 a.m., somewhere across town, or maybe already halfway to campus, Alyssa got an email. Final payment failed, enrollment withdrawn. At 8:41 a.m., my phone started ringing. It was my mother. I watched it buzz on the counter while I stirred sugar into my coffee. I knew exactly how the conversation would go if I picked up. How devastated Alyssa was, how out of character this all was, how I had overreacted. So I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times. By the 5th missed call, a text came through. "What did you do to your sister?" I stared at it for a moment, feeling a strange, twisted smile tug at my lips. I answered with one word. Nothing. Because for 30 years, I'd done everything. Freezing the account wasn't cruelty. It was the first time I'd removed my hands from under her feet and let her feel the ground on her own. And whether my family knew it yet or not, that was just the beginning. The thing about my mother is she doesn't pace her anger. She front-loads it. By 9:00 a.m., I had 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 text accusing me of attempted murder on Alyssa's future. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I knew how they'd sound. My mother's voice pitched too high, weaving in and out of sobs while never once actually saying, "We messed up." I was standing at the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee when my phone started ringing again. Same number, same ringtone that had always meant, "Drop everything. There's a fire." I stared at it until it went still. By then, Daniel had wandered into the kitchen in pajama pants and a t-shirt, hair all over the place, eyes squinting against the light. He kissed my cheek, reached for a mug, and glanced at my phone. "You're not going to answer?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Good. He didn't ask for details. He didn't press. That was the thing about Daniel. He trusted my instincts even when my own family didn't. The phone buzzed again, this time with a text. "Mom, what did you do to your sister?" I took a slow sip of coffee, thumb hovering over the keyboard. "Me, nothing." And it was true. For 30 years, everything I'd done had been for her. Covering, fixing, smoothing, cushioning. This was the first time I'd done nothing. By lunchtime, my dad's name finally appeared on my screen. He didn't call. He texted. That alone told me how serious they thought this was. Dad, Camille, call me. This is serious. I sat at the dining table, the remnants of yesterday's flowers still in a vase. Petals starting to curl, edges bruising from too much time in the open air. I dialed. He picked up on the first ring. Camille, he said, no hello. Do you understand what you've done? Good morning to you too, I said. This isn't the time for jokes, he snapped. Alyssa's enrollment has been withdrawn. They dropped her. They won't reopen it without payment. She's going to lose the entire semester, maybe the year. I know, I said. Silence. I could almost hear him recalibrating. You know, he repeated, and you're okay with that? Yes, I said. You don't mean that. I do. He sucked in a breath. She has no way to fix this. The university doesn't care about family drama. They told your mother it's a systems issue, not emotional. They need payment. That's it. Interesting, I said. They and I have that in common. Camille, he said, voice suddenly pleading. Honey, this is too far. She was emotional. It was your wedding. People say things they don't mean. She threw wine on my wedding dress, I said, not raising my voice. She called me a fraud. In front of my husband. In front of our families. That's not things you don't mean. That's articulation. He exhaled harshly. So this is about revenge. No, I said. If this was revenge, I would have done it years ago. Another silence stretched between us, long and taut. Alyssa is your sister, he said finally. We raised you to look out for each other. You raised me, I corrected, to look out for her. He didn't deny it. When we hung up, I felt surprisingly calm. Not triumphant, not guilty, just clear. For the first time, they were feeling something I'd been feeling my whole life. What it's like when your safety net steps aside. That afternoon, I opened my laptop again. The shared account was frozen, but that wasn't the only place Alyssa lived rent-free. I logged into the health insurance portal. When Alyssa's temp job didn't offer benefits 2 years ago, I'd quietly added her to the plan Daniel and I shared. Just until she gets on her feet, I'd told myself. She never did. Her name was still there under dependents. I hovered over it for a second. Not because I hesitated, but because part of me wanted to mark the moment. Then I clicked remove. The system warned me, removing a dependent will change coverage. I clicked confirm. Next, I opened the student loan portal. In my name, for loans not attached to my degree. When Alyssa missed the grant deadline, she'd called me sobbing. I can't lose this, Cam. I'm finally trying, she'd said. I'd signed as a responsible party, set up automatic payments for her minimums, promising myself I'd help just until she got stabilized. I navigated to the settings and canceled the autopay. Another warning. Failure to pay may result in default. I let that sit on the screen for a few seconds, like a caption under our entire relationship. Then I clicked confirm. No dramatics, no announcements. I just quietly closed exit after exit, letting the structure of her life finally stand on its own weight. The next day, Mom tried a different tactic. She texted a picture of Alyssa's university acceptance letter, the same one she'd framed on the mantel last year, bragging to anyone who visited about her baby girl making something of herself. Mom, you were so proud of her then. How can you take that away from her now? I stared at the image. What she didn't understand was that I wasn't the one taking anything away. I'd given Alyssa more chances than she'd ever earned. I locked my phone without replying. Late that night, brushing my teeth beside Daniel, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned, then turned it toward me. A DM from my mother. Mom, I didn't want to involve you, but I'm worried about Camille. She's being controlling, punishing her sister. Please watch for that behavior. It can get worse. Daniel snorted toothpaste foam and nearly choked laughing. He wiped his mouth, then read the message in a dramatic stage whisper. Punishing her sister, he repeated. Baby, if that was your intention, you're way more restrained than I would be. I laughed too, but it died quickly, because that was the moment it crystallized. They weren't trying to get me to forgive Alyssa. They were trying to shame me back into character. The stable one, the fixer, the problem solver who quietly absorbs everything and begs for scraps of gratitude. They wanted me back on script. I dried my hands and grabbed my phone. For the first time since the account freeze, I texted my mother. Me. If Alyssa apologizes directly to Daniel, I'll consider talking. No response. Of course there wasn't. Alyssa doesn't apologize, especially not to other women. And now, not to the man who watched her humiliate his wife in the ugliest way possible. So the silence continued, but it had shifted. Before, my silence was endurance. Now, it was a line. And I had no intention of stepping back over it. Silence has a weight to it. By day, 2 after the wedding, it hung over my phone like humidity. Dense, heavy, something you could feel even when nobody was texting. The calls from my mother slowed. My dad didn't reach out again. Alyssa was quiet, which for her wasn't calm. It was strategy. They were regrouping, rewriting the script, trying to figure out how to get me back in my old role. The predictable one, the fixer, the woman who handled everyone else's storms and called it family. But I wasn't stepping into that part anymore. And the moment they realized it, things began to break. I started with facts, not feelings. I called Alyssa's university, something I'd done dozens of times on her behalf. The academic advisor recognized my name immediately. "Camille, is everything okay?" "Fine," I said, just confirming her enrollment status. A pause, papers rustling, keystrokes. Then, "She's been withdrawn. Payment deadline passed. Space was offered to another student." I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "And her housing?" "Campus housing is tied to active enrollment. She has 14 days to vacate." 14 days. I thanked her, hung up, and set my phone down. I didn't smile, didn't celebrate, didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. A few hours later, Alyssa finally broke her silence. A single text. A thumbs up emoji. No explanation, no apology, not even a real sentence. Like she was signaling to a coworker that the meeting room had been booked. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. I didn't answer. The next morning, a voicemail came through. Her voice was breezy, forced chipper, too fast. "Hey, Cam, looks like the account froze? Maybe the bank flagged something? The rent office at my housing is being weird about it. Can you just clear it up real quick?" Clear it up. Like this was a smudge on a mirror. Like she hadn't thrown red wine on my wedding dress 48 hours earlier. Still, I said nothing. 2 days later, Alyssa. "They're telling me I have to move out by Friday. Seriously? You're going to let that happen?" Yes. Yes, I was. My mom escalated next. Guilt is her favorite language. She sent me a photo that was supposed to tug at my heartstrings. Alyssa sitting on a friend's couch, curled up, surrounded by trash bags holding her clothes and belongings. But I noticed something else. One of the boxes in the corner was labeled in my handwriting. The same neat script I used the day I'd helped pack her things when she moved into housing the first time, folded her clothes, organized her textbooks, made sure she felt supported. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not triumph. Just the hollow recognition that I had spent years building her safety nets. She'd spent years assuming they were permanent. Meanwhile, Alyssa started her real campaign where it mattered most to her, online. She posted a picture on Instagram, her holding a glass of wine again, smirking at the camera like she wasn't unraveling. Caption: "Some people are great at pretending. Guess I learned from the best." And she tagged me. That was the moment I realized Alyssa wasn't just spiraling. She was trying to take me down with her. Publicly, pettily, predictably. A former coworker of mine even DM'd me. "Hey, saw your sister's post. Everything okay?" And that was it. Not an explosion, not a meltdown. Just a quiet click inside me, like a lock sliding open. A door I'd been meaning to walk through for years. I didn't text Alyssa, didn't post back, didn't call anyone for advice. I reached out to the scholarship foundation Alyssa had received funding from, one she got only after I wrote her a glowing letter of recommendation, vouching for her dedication and character. Funny words now. My email was polite, professional, surgical. I wrote that I needed to withdraw my endorsement, attached a screenshot of the university's withdrawal notice, explained I could no longer support her participation in their program due to major instability and misrepresentation. The foundation responded within hours. Interested, concerned, requesting more context. I gave it clean, factual, emotionless. By the next afternoon, Alyssa's scholarship was revoked. No ceremony, no drama. Just a small administrative update in a system somewhere. Scholarship rescinded. She found out almost instantly. 3 calls in a row. Ignored. Then a 4th. This time I answered. Her voice burst through the line, frantic, furious, panicked. "You ruined my future," she shouted. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous of me, my potential, my opportunities." "Alyssa," I said quietly, "stop." She didn't. "You want me to fail," she continued. "You want to feel superior. You're being vindictive and everyone sees it. Why are you doing this to me?" I let the silence settle for a full 5 seconds before responding. "You did this," I said simply. "No, you threw wine on me at my wedding," I said. "You've mocked me for years. You've taken my help for granted. You've treated my stability like it belonged to you, and I let it happen, every time. She didn't say anything. And now, I continued, I've stopped. She exhaled sharply. Okay, fine. What do you want? Money? A public apology? I can post something. Clarify everything. Is that what this is? A negotiation? No, I said. There is nothing you can offer me. You're not serious, she whispered. Camille, I'm your sister. Yeah, I said softly. That used to mean something. And I hung up. By Friday, her dorm eviction was official. I didn't know where she ended up. Didn't ask. Didn't care enough to follow her social media trail. Mom sent more emotional grenades, each more desperate than the last. Aunts and cousins joined in. Family is all we have. Meet halfway. You're the stable one. We need you to restore harmony. Alyssa always looked up to you. Looked up to me? She couldn't even look at me while throwing wine in my face. They all wanted the same thing. Reset. Not resolution, not accountability. They wanted the old Camille, the quiet banker, the emotional filter, the family shock absorber. But something in me had finally broken loose, and I wasn't crawling back into the cage they built from my own guilt. My dad finally texted, "Do you want a relationship with your family or not?" A few years ago, that question would have gutted me. Now, I recognized it for what it was. A threat disguised as an invitation. A demand wrapped in a moral bow. What he meant was, "Do you want us back? Then get back in line." So I answered honestly, "Not like this." He didn't reply. By then, I knew the shift wasn't temporary, wasn't reactive, wasn't emotional. I wasn't stepping back into my old role, and the person most terrified of that wasn't Alyssa. It was the whole family. Because when I stopped falling on the grenade, they realized it was always theirs. By the time the first week after the wedding ended, the silence in my family wasn't peaceful anymore. It was tactical, strategic, the kind of quiet you get when people are no longer trying to fix a problem, just trying to get the problem person back in line. That person was me. And I think that's when I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. My family didn't want reconciliation. They wanted reset. Reset to the version of me that they depended on. Reset to the woman who quietly paid for everything. Reset to the sister who absorbed the fallout from Alyssa's self-made disasters. Reset to the daughter who handled every financial crisis before they even felt it. Alyssa might have thrown the wine, but the whole family built the table she threw it from. The cousin brigade arrived first. Between Wednesday night and Friday morning, I received 11 messages from people I hadn't heard from in literal years. People who hadn't even commented on my engagement photos, suddenly acting like we shared a childhood bedroom. Every message came wrapped in that sugary, sticky tone families use when they want to manipulate without sounding manipulative. "Hey, Camille, long time. Just checking in. Heard there was a misunderstanding at the wedding." You know how emotional Alyssa gets. Stress affects people differently. "You're the stable one. We're counting on you to pull this back together." That last line flipped a switch in me. You're the stable one. Of course, that was the role. That was the assignment. And they were furious that I'd suddenly stopped stepping onto the stage. My mom escalated next, again. She sent a photo of Alyssa's old acceptance letter, as if that somehow obligated me to fund her new life. Then she sent a paragraph about family bonds and sisters forgiving sisters. Conveniently, no mention of spilled wine or public humiliation. I didn't reply. So she tried a new angle. She DM'd Daniel again. But this time, instead of vague warnings, she went for emotional sabotage. "I'm worried Camille is being controlling. This isn't normal. Please don't let her isolate herself." Daniel read it aloud while we were getting ready for bed, toothbrush in his mouth. His eyebrows flew up. He spit foam into the sink and wheezed. "You controlling?" Then he put on a mock-serious voice. "Sweetheart, should I be concerned? Are you about to forbid me from, what, using Netflix?" I laughed. He laughed. But inside, a bitterness prickled. My mother hadn't messaged me that gently in years. But a man I married 48 hours ago, she treated him like a hostage negotiator. I sat down on the edge of the tub. "She's not trying to fix this," I murmured. "She's trying to shame me for not playing my role." Daniel nodded. "Then stop playing it." Later that night, I texted my mother. Just one sentence. "If Alyssa apologizes directly to Daniel, I'll consider talking." Alyssa apologize? To my husband? For humiliating me? Never happening. And I think Mom knew it. No reply came. Not that night, not the next, not ever. April 6th was when the real break happened. My dad texted me privately. "Do you want a relationship with your family or not?" No context, no softness, no curiosity about how I felt. Just a line in the sand. If I didn't clean up the mess Alyssa made, I was the one severing ties. If I didn't sacrifice myself again, I was walking away. If I didn't forgive instantly, I didn't love them. But that's not what the question really meant. What he meant was, do you want a relationship with your family the way it currently functions? And the answer was easy. Not like this. He didn't reply. Over the weekend, Daniel and I were invited to dinner at his parents' house, a quiet, warm home where love didn't feel like a transaction and boundaries weren't treated like betrayal. We sat around their kitchen table, the smell of roasted garlic filling the air, and told them everything. Not dramatically, not accusingly, just the truth. Daniel's mom reached across the table, squeezed my hand gently, and said, "Sweetheart, people show you who they are when they think you owe them." Daniel's dad leaned back, thoughtful. "Well," he said, "sounds like you're finally done playing the role they wrote for you." I blinked. "Role?" He nodded. "Every family has one. Alyssa's was chaos. Yours was the net." And then he asked something nobody in my family had ever asked me. "So, Camille, what do you want to do next?" It hit me harder than I expected. Because I'd been so focused on stopping Alyssa's freefall, I hadn't paused to imagine my own next step. For my entire adult life, every time something went wrong for Alyssa, I thought, what should I do? But for the first time, someone was asking, what do you choose? And that was a different question entirely. Over the next few days, I noticed something strange. My mom wasn't updating me with hourly panic texts. My dad wasn't calling to negotiate. Alyssa wasn't blowing up my phone. Even my cousins had quieted down. At first, I thought maybe they'd finally backed off. Then my aunt texted, "We don't know what happened, but freezing someone's life like this, it's not okay. She made a mistake. This is extreme." Extreme. No one had used that word when I paid Alyssa's rent for 3 months while she figured things out. I bailed her out of that pyramid scheme disaster. I covered her car rental after she drove uninsured. She insulted Daniel at my graduation. She called me insecure and lucky, and a dozen other cuts disguised as jokes. She walked into my wedding wearing bridal white, but the moment I stopped paying, suddenly I was a monster. That's when I realized this wasn't about consequences. It was about access. Access to me, my income, my emotional labor, my stability. And when I locked the door, they didn't mourn the relationship. They mourned the loss of the benefits. Then something happened that not even I expected. On Monday morning, I called Alyssa's academic advisor again, not as a sister, but as a formality. "Has she applied for reinstatement?" I asked. "No," the advisor said gently. "Not even attempted. She was spiraling and hiding it. If my parents knew she hadn't re-enrolled, they'd have been banging down my door again. But they hadn't said a word, which meant she still hadn't told them the truth. That's when I realized Alyssa wasn't done hitting the ground. She hadn't even found it yet, and I wasn't about to cushion her landing. On Tuesday morning, just past 8 a.m., someone knocked on our door. Not a frantic knock, not a family knock. You know, the kind, loud, desperate, rapid fire, like they're trying to break the silence along with the wood. This was a single, hesitant knock. Daniel opened our bedroom door slightly and called down the hall. "Camille, someone's here." I slipped on a sweater and walked downstairs, half expecting my mom, half fearing Alyssa, and fully bracing for impact. But it wasn't either of them. It was Jason, Alyssa's ex. The one she had publicly torched a year ago. The one she'd claimed never deserved her energy. He looked terrible. Thin. Hollow-eyed. Shoulders curved inward like life had been pressing down on him since the last time I'd seen him. Even his voice sounded frayed at the edges. "Hey," he said, offering a tiny, sheepish nod. I'm not here for drama." Daniel stepped behind me, not aggressively, but with that quiet, protective stance he always defaulted to when he sensed my family hovering near. Jason swallowed. I ran into Alyssa. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Where?" He shifted uncomfortably. "A pay-by-the-week motel, off Route 7, the one near the old gas station." I blinked. That motel was barely a place to sleep. It was where people went when they ran out of couches and friends. "What happened?" I asked carefully. She looked bad," he said. "Not messed up, just lost." The cold feeling deepened. He glanced behind him, making sure no one else was listening, then reached into his pocket. "She told me she needed to tell someone, and I didn't know who else to come to." He unfolded a piece of paper and handed it to me. A printout from a clinic, plain, unassuming, just a few lines. "Pregnancy confirmed, 6 weeks." The refrigerator hum filled the silence between us. "She said," Jason hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "She said you were still the only person who ever really took care of her." His voice softened, "and she knows she ruined it." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The paper trembled in my hand, but my fingers were steady. "Alyssa, Pregnant. Jason wasn't finished. She didn't ask me for anything, he said. She wasn't trying to twist it. She just said she needed to tell someone and she didn't know how to tell you or your parents. I stared at the pregnancy confirmation, the words blurring slightly. 6 weeks. The wedding had been, barely over a week ago? A wave of emotion rolled through me, but it wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even sadness. It was something else. Relief. Not relief that she was struggling. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but relief that I finally understood the full picture. This wasn't about tuition or rent or scholarships anymore. This wasn't about spilled wine or white dresses or screaming voicemails. My sister's life wasn't cracking. It was collapsing. And for the first time ever, she wasn't trying to drag me into the rubble with her. Jason lingered awkwardly. I just thought you'd want to know, he said. Daniel thanked him, shook his hand, and gently closed the door. We stood together in the quiet, the early morning sunlight creeping across the hardwood floor. I sat back down at the kitchen table and unfolded the page again. Pregnancy confirmed. 6 weeks. Daniel sat across from me. He didn't say, we need to help her. He didn't say, you should call your parents. He didn't say, this changes everything. He just reached out and lightly touched the paper. What are you feeling? He asked quietly. I breathed in, and I realized something strange and unexpectedly freeing. I didn't feel responsible. Not for her pregnancy, not for her eviction, not for her scholarship loss, not for her unraveling. For the first time in my life, my sister's crisis wasn't instantly transforming into my crisis. The drawer where I'd placed the letters, the list Alyssa wrote, the messages she never spoke aloud, felt like the right place for this paper too. So that's where I put it. Folded neatly, filed away, not acted on. Not avoided out of cruelty. Avoided because, for once, it wasn't my weight to carry. I didn't tell my parents. Not out of spite, not out of secrecy. Simply because it wasn't my job to explain Alyssa's life anymore. For 30 years, I'd been the interpreter, the mediator, the translator of chaos. Mom would call crying. Dad would call lecturing. Alyssa would call demanding. And I would clean up the mess before they even finished describing it. This time, I didn't pick up the phone. Not because I didn't care, but because caring doesn't always mean intervening. Sometimes caring is knowing when to step back. Sometimes love is letting the consequences be the teacher you never could. Alyssa wasn't reaching out to manipulate me anymore. She wasn't reaching out to demand or blame or spin a narrative. She was just trying to breathe through the collapse. And for the first time, I finally understood. People like Alyssa don't change when you catch them. They change when you step aside and let the ground teach them what you never could. I poured myself a glass of water, stared out the window at the early morning sky, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light, unburdened, free. That was the last weight I put down.